They have a belief in the truth of this, and therefore they transfer it all to the affidavit itself. And the affidavit is really quite interesting. It's very basically, he's a criminal, right? The heart of it, let me just get to the heart of it, that Socrates does not believe in the gods the state believes in, but other new spiritual beings instead. See, it's a religious charge. Same thing as Jesus. It's a religious charge. You know, what are you, son of God? What is your relationship to God? Therefore, it's a very interesting parallel. Now, Jesus is silent. His teachings are necessarily esoteric. They're given only to the inner circle. For Socrates, it is all exoteric, public, open, revealed. And as a matter of fact, what he does disclose is quite astonishing. Now, in the Jesus tradition, he places himself in terms of John the Baptist and earlier prophets. He obviously includes Elijah and Moses in that tradition of which he's a member. Separates himself from contemporary views of some Pharisees, but not all. But in any case, he's part of that tradition. And he sees himself as an expression of it, a successor, as it were. Same thing with Socrates. Right? Now, Socrates looks at these charges and he says, you know what, this is all, these are charges. You know what the real charge is? He says, the real charge is philosophy. He says, that's what it is. People are afraid of this. That's the real charge against me. There's an ancient prejudice against philosophy, because people have the idea that philosophy is something that the particular philosopher is really engaged in prying into things under the earth. You know what's under the earth? Spirits and those things. And fools around with trying to mess up with what's in the heavens. And he makes the weaker argument the stronger. This is a sophist rhetoric. Now, Socrates, let me tell you how I got the reputation for being wise, because philosophy is the love of wisdom. He says, how did I get the reputation of being wise? He says, oh, I'll tell you why. He says, a friend of mine, Chaperon, went up to the Delphic Oracle and asked whether or not anyone was wiser. Delphic Oracle says, no one's wiser. Now, curiously enough, what we find with Socrates, no belief. No belief. What does he do? He seeks, therefore, to prove the oracle wrong, is what he says. I'm going to prove the oracle wrong. I'm going to go around and test the oracle. And if I find someone who's wiser than I am, I'm going to bring them over to the Delphic Oracle and say, see? You're wrong. Now, what's most interesting about this dialogue, the way it's structured, is that a lot of people are caught up in, is he guilty or is he not guilty? But the real fun in reading the dialogue is to see that he gives all the evidence you need to convict him. That's all. He gives it all. Now, this is the center of it, that Socrates does not believe in the gods the state believes in, but in other new spiritual beings instead. Well, right in the middle of the dialogue, he says, by the way, I have this reputation. And he says, you know what? That's quite true. I have a certain inner voice that comes to me, a spiritual thing that comes to me and warns me about things not to do. He says, oh yeah, it's been around long. That's what I believe in. That's what I believe in. Yeah, There it is. So he believes in other new beings that God's the state believes in. And then he shifts, and then he gives his relationship to God in this marvelous dialogue. And he says, let it be clear to you, he says, that my relationship to philosophy is a spiritual one, right? It's a spiritual one. You see, the charge is, but you believe in other new spiritual beings instead. He says, yeah, I'll tell you about the spiritual part of my nature. He says, you know what? I have been commanded. I've been posted on to be a philosopher by God. He said, that's where I got my job. I was posted to be a gunner. That's it. And he says, you know what? I'll never cease from that job. Nope. And he said, you know what I'm going to do? He said, I do this all the time. He said, I'm going to show what is in me to anyone, and I'm going to speak in my usual way, not parables, not to a small group, openly, public, exoteric. And then he says, you know, when you think of it, he says, there's no greater good in the whole society and the state than my service to God. I'm in the service of God. And he said, I'm in fact a gift of God. He said, that's why I'm a gift of God. And if you don't believe it, he says, you know what? It's not going to be easy to find another one like me. And he says, I'm in a long line. He said, you know, it's not going to stop with me. I'm in a whole tradition, successor. I'm in a whole line of philosophers. It's not going to stop with me, what's going on. Don't worry about it. He said, it'll happen again. There'll be another one. There'll be another one. They'll do the same thing. They'll kill him. It's okay. After all, you get that kind of a job from that kind of a boss, you might as well go ahead with it. Right? There may not be any retirement benefits, but I bet it's going to be a good job, right? Now look. Remember the theme we brought up before. We said that what's the peak experience? Is there any peak experience Socrates had? Well, we have several examples of peak experiences described in the Symposium and the Phaedrus and Republic. But in the Symposium, there's a special one where Socrates was said to have stood in one place, meditating, and the sun was coming up, and it was during a campaign, so many men came out and watched, and then he stood there in one spot for the whole day till the sun set. It was evening then, somewhat cool, so the men came out and put out their pallets and slept around, and many of them wanted to see whether or not he'd move during the night. He stood in one place for 24 hours, holding on to that one meditation. That's called the Mahasamadhi. And then when he got out of it, he did his usual trip and went away on his business as he usually does. Now, what does he do with that kind of thing? What do people do with peak experience? Why do they have to peak experiences? They like peaks, no doubt. Peak experiences. Peak experience can be said to be the highest thing that has been revealed to you, or that what you participate in. And therefore it has to shape what you're doing. It has to shape what you're doing. So therefore, from this scene, it's out of this scene that Socrates says, pardon me, not in that scene, in that campaign, he said, it's, well, I'll give it to you. It's a great line, and I don't want to miss it up.